Ben Shapiro can certainly draw a crowd. And sometimes protests, like this one at the University of California, Berkeley. But he doesn't let that stop him from sharing his conservative views.
The reason that I am here is because fascism does not own this university.
And oftentimes running intellectual circles around just about everyone he goes up against.
Ben, talk about what it's like when you go to some of these college campuses. You spark a pretty big reaction.
Yeah, I think that there's a willing attempt to undermine the very basis of what I stand for. People deliberately lie about what it is that I am saying. People will suggest that, for example, I'm a white supremacist when I am militantly anti-white supremacist.
In fact, the 35-year-old Harvard-educated lawyer is devout in his Jewish faith.
The attempt to paint me as some sort of racist, the attempt to paint me as some sort of bigot, or somebody who wants to hurt other people, I'm some sort of fascist. Those lies are the way that the left avoids the debate, unfortunately. The hard left avoids the debate anyway.
The debate is something he doesn't shy away from, and in his new book, The Right Side of History, he makes his case for how Judeo-Christian values and Greek natural law made the West great. You say this book is really about two things. It's about two mysteries. The first is, why are things so good? And the second, why are we blowing it? Explain what you mean.
So we live in the most prosperous time in human history, a time when a baby born can expect to live past the year 80. A time when virtually no one is living in starvation conditions in the West, when virtually everybody can expect to have a long, healthy life, when racial tolerance is at an all-time high, when freedom is at an all-time high. So how did things get so good? How did we end up here? Because 2 centuries ago, everybody was dying in nasty, brutish, and short fashion. So what exactly changed is question number one. And number two is, why are we so angry at each other amidst the most glorious conditions ever lived in by any human beings at any time? And the answer is, we have to investigate the roots of our civilization.
He says the reason we're tearing each other apart is because we've forgotten the foundations that brought us together.
And those foundations, I contend, in the right side of history, lie, one, in Judeo-Christian ethics, and two, lie in Greek teleology, the idea that we can apply reason to the universe and come up with good moral answers and scientific answers to the conditions that surround us. So that combination, the push and pull between human reason and divine revelation, that push and pull created the West. We have tried forcibly, in many cases, to undermine both of those bases for Western civilization. Then we're surprised when we return to the chaos that preceded them.
And it's that chaos he's trying to fight against on his radio and podcast show, cable news, and columns he writes for the Daily Wire, which he founded.
Ben, how does moral purpose play into all of this? You say we've really abandoned this as Americans.
Well, I mean, there are two perceptions of moral purpose that tend to merge in the West. Perception number one is that it is your job to serve God, that God put you on the planet not to serve your own ends, but to serve his ends. And this is in the Judeo-Christian tradition, the idea of revelation, that God gave you a moral purpose and that you have to live out that morality if you want to fulfill the purpose for which you were put on planet Earth.
And perception number two, Greek tradition, which he says suggests we all have the capacity for reason, and that, paired with virtue, is what it means to be human. In the West, he says these two perceptions merged.
So the idea was that serving God was serving reason at the same time, and that the push and pull between those two, applying reason to Judeo-Christian morality and applying Judeo-Christian morality as the fundamental foundations of reason, that is how you get to human rights, that's how you get to science, that's how you get to the idea that we ought to have political discussions, that's how you get to democracy as opposed to dictatorship, that the push and pull, the tension between these two poles is what creates the bridge upon which Western civilization sits.
As for why Christians should be especially interested,
I mean, I think the reason they should buy the book is because it gives a rationale for why Judeo-Christian values lie at the root of Western civilization. Because what we're hearing from all of our relatives is that you're an idiot if you believe in Revelation at Sinai or the Sermon on the Mount, that you're a fool if you believe the tenets of Judeo-Christianity, that if you believe any of those values, that you're basically a dunce, and that we could come to all these values on our own. This book is a ringing rebuke to that notion. You do need to make certain fundamental assumptions about the nature of the universe that are rooted in a God-based orderly universe if you actually want to have a Western civilization worth fighting for and preserving.
He does.
Threatening to lock up journalists.
I needed 600 officers to protect me at Berkeley.
And puts himself on the front line leading that charge. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.